I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Some of the best books to improve your magic have nothing to do with the magic you perform. In fact, all too often, as magicians, we're always looking for a book that's going to give us the next trick that's going to make us into a great performer, something that's going to transform us. But actually, the secret to transformational reading comes from reading things that you won't ever perform. In this episode of Erudite Magic, we're going to tackle some subjects and answer some questions like, why should a card magician read about coin magic? Why should a mentalist study self-working tricks? Or why should a technician dive into magic history and theory? The answer may surprise you. Stick around and I'll show you how reading outside your comfort zone will make you a more versatile, creative, and deceptive magician. And I'm going to provide some examples and stories along the way. So let's start with a fundamental level, one that I'm going to call the theory factor. I've done several videos over the last 5 years on magic theory books, some of the top 5, why you should read them, and individual reviews of theory books. But let's start at a more basic level and say, why should you read magic theory? And the reason, simply and succinctly put, is because understanding how magic works is more powerful than just learning a new trick or technique. I get it that it's not always fun to read magic theory, but that's part of the point of this video, is that we have to read outside of our comfort zones if we truly want to elevate ourselves to the next level. So what kind of books am I talking about when I say theory? Of course, there are authors that come to mind that you could look into their works. Darwin Ortiz is one of the first names that most people think of because of his well-known work, Strong Magic. But he also has Designing Miracles, which some contend is even better. Now, while Strong Magic and Designing Miracles, I think, mostly focus on close-up magic, it doesn't really matter what kind of magic you do. Even as a self-proclaimed and performing mentalist, there are items that I found in this book that have helped me to develop my character or understand what makes this particular effect work and how I can increase the impossibility and impact to my audience. Juan Tamariz is another name from the Spanish school of thought and has published several larger books of his theory, like The Magic Way or The Magic Rainbow. Ascanio is another Spanish master who has given us a lot of thought about what goes into his style of magic. And that's what's so cool about all of these different theory authors. You're going to get different takes based on their life experiences. I'm going to add here that it's important to read people with whom you disagree about theory. And I'll give you a specific example for me. That would be Jamie Ian Swiss. Jamie has published a trilogy of books about his thinking about magic. In reading those books, I found myself often vehemently disagreeing with Jamie on his opinion. But that is exactly the point. It's causing me to think about what I believe about magic. It's testing the limits of what I know and expanding the ideas that I need to consider that may not have occurred to me initially. As a result, I feel that my magic, my theory, has become even stronger and more me, which is part of the point of all of this. Of course, there are many other voices that you can check out, and I've done reviews on some of these books, so search for those. If you have a favorite theory author, put it down in the comments below so that others can hear who you like reading and why you agree or disagree with them. Beyond theory, which is generically for everyone, I also think it's important to study outside of your specialty. For example, if you're a card magician, which statistically means you should probably study coin magic. And I get it that there aren't a whole lot of books out there about coin magic, but each of these disciplines has a little bit of something different that it brings to the table. And when we go back in history, we look at some of the best performers of all time. Let's take Dai Vernon and close-up magic as an example. He was widely studied. He understood the importance of learning techniques from cups and balls type moves, or coins, or cards, and all of these facets of the art build up a different skill set. To stick with this example of card magicians reading coin sleights, when you learn coin sleights, it requires a lot more misdirection than a typical card trick does. It can also help improve our hand coordination, doing one thing as we talk and look in a different way. Additionally, because of the repetitive motions of coin magic, you'll learn softer, smoother handlings, things that might bleed over into your card work. If you are a magician, it might help you to study some mentalism. Mentalism is a lot about audience control, scripting, and pacing. Not to say that magic doesn't include those things, but they're far more important in mentalism, given that there's often not a colorful prop or something unusual to help carry the story through. In addition, I think that there are a lot of psychological convincers that get layered on in mentalism as you study it and learn it that magicians could adopt and incorporate. And there's just a deeply personal touch that mentalism brings to the table, that people imagine something in their mind, it's theirs, and when you extract that thought, it has far more of a connection and impact with your audience because it was personal. Darren Brown is a perfect example of this, someone who blends magic and mentalism practically seamlessly. But there are many others who've done the same thing. If you're looking to study some mentalism as a magician, there are a couple of names that come to mind. Barry Richardson did an entire trilogy of books that are for you, and I think that there's a good blend of magic and mentalism, with most of them having that mental magic or mentalism flair, so it's worth checking those out if you haven't already. Bruce Bernstein is another person who comes to mind. I already mentioned Eugene Berger in the theory section, but he also blurred those lines between magic and mentalism, and I'm sure that you'll come up with many others. What about sleight heavy versus self-working tricks? I think it's important to study both. If you're already a master sleight of hand artist, then studying some of these self-working tricks can really help to appreciate good structure within a trick and psychology that makes it work. And sometimes when you blend the two things, maybe you're working on a lot of knuckle-busting material that's already in your show, mixing it up with something that's self-working can change up the pacing and throw your audience off a little bit if they're already suspecting that you've got some fast hands. And if you're a lover of self-working card tricks, study some sleights. They can really help to elevate the impossibility of even a self-working miracle. For example, studying and learning a false shuffle can really elevate the impossibility of some self-working trick that uses a stacked deck. I think a perfect example of this is Juan Tamariz. When you look at a lot of his tricks, they're not particularly difficult, but we know that he has the chops. He certainly can perform all of these sleights, and when he incorporates those, it totally changes the vibe of these self-working miracles to where they not only fool lay audiences, but also completely fry magicians. So just that example shows you the value of studying both things. Obviously, if you're going to read all different types of books, then you're going to want to build up your library. And if you're going to do that, you want to do it at good prices, which is why I encourage you to shop with the sponsor of this week's video, Don's Magic and Books. Don has a huge array of all different kinds of books on his website. He's always getting in something new, something old, something rare. So no matter what you're looking for, you can shop with confidence at donsmagicandbooks.com. One of the coolest parts about Don's inventory is that he gets in these rare and hard to find books that you've probably been looking for a while, things that are out of print. Whenever he gets those in, they're always on a first come, first served basis, usually not very many copies, but always reasonably priced, meaning they're not going to last very long, which is why I encourage you to check out his website frequently. It's being updated all the time, and I hate to see you miss out on one of those books that you've been looking for a long time. But regardless of what kind of magic you're into, whether it's coin magic, card magic, theory, sleight heavy, self-working, in print, out of print, shop with Don's Magic and Books. How about historical books or the history of magic? Why would you even bother, you might ask? And one of the primary reasons that I could come up with is because I think that studying the past will help you innovate as you move into the future. In other words, what's old is new again. On a practical level, being widely read can actually save you money because when a trick is marketed, oftentimes it's already been hidden in a book. And in my newsletter this week, the Erudite Magic Digest, I talk about this sometimes. Tricks that have just been released that you can find in books that might already be on your shelves. So if you haven't already checked that out, it's free to subscribe, and it's where we continue the conversation beyond these Sundays. I can't tell you how many times I've thought that I've invented some sort of move or trick or something like that, and later realized either through a friend or doing some research online or just randomly picking up a book that actually that idea already existed. So it's kind of a waste of time sometimes. If we don't study history, we might be doomed to repeat it. And there are multiple types of history. Sometimes you're just reading about a performer or a creator and what was their life like. Understanding those old masters and how they thought, performed, and adapted, I think is really, really helpful to us. And we can get inspired from historical performance styles. If you think that card tricks and mentalism don't mix, well, then you're going to have to explain how Dunninger pulled it off. The Jinx, which was Ted Anneman's magazine geared mostly towards mentalists and mental magic, has a lot of programs of famous magicians from the time. Stuart James went and saw Dunninger and recorded the entire program of every trick that he did. When you read through that program, it reads 60 to 70% card tricks, and yet Dunninger was well known at the time for being one of America's premier mentalists. There are a lot of books that fall into this category, and if you're looking for inspiration to get started, I always recommend the classic correspondence series put together by Mike Caveney because of the rich beauty of the books in both all of the lithographs, color posters, but also the correspondence between magicians, seeing what we as a group have been talking about for centuries. You're sure to learn some important lessons and be inspired along the way. This next category is one that I think might surprise some of you because I believe that to become a good magician, you actually have to read outside of the magic literature. Everything up to this point you can get from magic dealers. But what about the books that have nothing to do with magic? I love to read outside of magic primarily because it inspires me. For example, a book like Influence. It's really about the art of selling, but when you read it, it reads a little bit like a magic book. There are techniques that the author has studied and identified over a long period of time that you can incorporate into your performances and even into your marketing if you're trying to build a magic business. There are books on theater and acting, because we all remember the famous saying by Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin that the magician is simply an actor playing the part of a magician. How are your acting skills? What are you doing to improve those? What about your storytelling? I'm currently reading a book about the art of storytelling because I want to have a better narrative for my show. I feel like I have all the tricks and beats that I like, but I'd like to come up with an overarching theme, a story, something that connects with the audience on an emotional level and gives them a beginning, a middle with conflict, and a resolution at the end. Reading books about sales and marketing can also be helpful as you seek to build out your performing business. And then finally, as an inspiration, read books about science and espionage. It's kind of fun to see some of the techniques that spies have used over time and how some older magicians have actually been spies because the techniques are very similar. Understanding the psychology of the human mind and then actually being able to misdirect it into thinking what you need it to think. So what about you? What is your favorite type of book to read outside of what you actually perform? Sound off down in the comments below with the most irrelevant book you've ever read that actually made you a better magician. If you need some help getting started with books to read across a wide variety of subject matter, then I encourage you to check out the playlist I made for you over here about the 5-foot shelf of magic. Reading all of those is guaranteed to make you a better magician. As always, my friend, I appreciate you watching. And until next time, keep reading. But not just the relevant books, also the irrelevant ones. You know what I mean.